You are standing in a control room, watching over 140 inmates with nothing but a set of buzzers and a bank of locked doors. You have been on the job for a matter of weeks. You do not yet know every sound this building makes, every trick its walls can play on a tired mind. And somewhere down the hallway, a group of men have just finished eating their lunch. They did not throw away the extra packet of peanut butter. They saved it. And in a few minutes, that ordinary jar of peanut butter is going to do something no crowbar, no shank, and no tunnel could manage on its own. It is going to talk a locked door into opening itself. It sounds absurd. A children's lunchbox staple, the same stuff spread on toast in kitchens across America, becoming the tool that springs a dozen men from a maximum security lockup. It sounds like the kind of plan too ridiculous to work, and that is exactly why it did. This is the story of how peanut butter, of all things, became a weapon of escape inside American prisons. Let's go back to Walker County, Alabama, in the summer of 2017. The Walker County Jail sits in the town of Jasper, a modest facility built to hold roughly 140 detainees on any given night. It runs the way most county jails run, understaffed, overworked, and dependent on whoever happens to be available to watch the control room. On the night in question, that person was new. He had not been on the job very long, and he was responsible for keeping track of every single inmate in the building, alone, from a single control station with a bank of electronic locks. The inmates had noticed him. They had noticed the way he checked and rechecked the numbers above each door before releasing a lock, the way any conscientious new hire would. And somewhere in that observation, an idea began to take shape. Above every cell in the jail, a number marked which door led where. It was a simple system designed for clarity. It was also, as it turned out, a system with a weakness nobody had thought to guard against. Peanut butter sticks. It holds its shape. It's dense enough to layer over a printed number and dry into something that, in a dim hallway, at a glance, looks convincingly like a different digit altogether. So the inmates went to work with what they had smuggled out from their own meals. Peanut butter served on jailhouse sandwiches. They smeared it carefully over the number above one of the cell doors, reshaping it to match the number of the exterior door instead. Then they waited. When the moment came, one of the inmates called out to the new guard, using the sequence you'd use for a routine door request. Somewhere in that control room, the guard checked the number above the door against his log, saw what he believed was a familiar cell number, and released the lock. Except the door that opened was not a cell door at all. It was the door to the outside world. 12 men walked through it. Once outside, they didn't stop to admire their work. They tore off their orange jumpsuits, grabbed blankets from their bunks, and threw them over a 15-foot perimeter fence lined with razor wire. It was not an elegant escape. Several of them were cut climbing over. One man sliced his thumb badly enough to need hospital treatment, but it worked. In under 10 minutes, by the sheriff's own estimate, 12 men had gone from locked inside a county jail to standing free on the other side of a fence that was supposed to be the last line of defense. Now think about what actually happened here. There was no tunnel, no hacksaw blade, no months of digging through concrete under cover of darkness. The entire escape hinged on one overworked new employee trusting a number stuck to a wall, and one dollop of peanut butter reshaping that number just enough to fool him. Walker County Sheriff James Underwood didn't mince words about it afterward. He said the inmates had taken advantage of a young fellow who hadn't been on the job very long and who was left to monitor 150 inmates essentially by himself. He called the inmates crazy like a fox. And in a detail that says everything about how thin the margin for error really is inside American correctional facilities. Underwood admitted that this was, in his words, one time the jail had simply slipped up. Within 8 hours, 11 of the 12 escapees were back in custody. Local police, sheriff's deputies, and even a state helicopter joined the search, sweeping the roads and fields around Jasper. One by one, the fugitives were caught, most of them close to the jail, some hiding in the immediate area, unprepared for a real run at freedom. They had planned the breakout. They had not planned much beyond it. But one man was different. Brady Andrew Kilpatrick, 24 years old, had been sitting in the Walker County Jail on charges of marijuana possession and drug paraphernalia, a far cry from the violent histories of some of the other escapees. He was also the only one of the 12 who managed to get out of the county entirely. While the others were rounded up within hours, Kilpatrick kept moving. He called his sister asking for a ride. She and her boyfriend borrowed a car and picked him up. And from there, Kilpatrick's brief run stretched on for 2 more days. He made it as far as Tequesta, Florida, hundreds of miles from the jail he had walked out of using nothing more than a smeared number and a stranger's trust. Police eventually caught up with him there and brought the story to its close. Afterward, Sheriff Underwood was asked whether the jail intended to change its menu, whether peanut butter sandwiches might quietly disappear from mealtime. He said no. Inmates, he noted, loved their peanut butter sandwiches, and the jail had no plans to take them away. What did change was how doors were verified and how much responsibility a single, inexperienced staff member was allowed to carry alone in a control room watching over well over 100 people. It's tempting to treat this story as nothing more than a strange headline, a believe-it-or-not footnote in the long history of American incarceration. But it points to something real about how prisons actually fail. It is rarely the walls that give way. It is rarely a fence cut in the dead of night by a criminal mastermind with a smuggled saw blade. More often, it's a gap in training, a moment of trust misplaced, a system built around the assumption that people will do exactly what they're expected to do, right up until 12 of them decide otherwise on the same night. And Walker County wasn't the only time peanut butter played a starring role in a story about prison walls failing to hold. Decades earlier, in Connecticut, a man named Frederick Merrill built an entire criminal reputation on this same unassuming pantry item. Merrill had a long history of violent offenses, along with a habit that by the 1980s had earned him a nickname that stuck with him for the rest of his life: the Peanut Butter Bandit. According to reporting from the Hartford Courant, Merrill's mother once smuggled a handgun into a jail concealed inside a jar of peanut butter, allowing him to escape custody. It became one of several escapes Merrill managed to pull off between the late 1960s and late 1980s, moving between Connecticut and Canadian prisons before eventually being recaptured each time. Two very different eras, two very different methods, but in both cases, the same overlooked object slipped past the people whose entire job was to prevent exactly that kind of failure. Picture what that means for the people whose job it actually is to keep a facility secure. Every day, corrections officers are trained to watch for the obvious threats: contraband cell phones, hidden blades, coordinated group movement in the yard. Nobody drills a new hire on what to do if a number over a door looks slightly off. Nobody imagines that the sandwich on an inmate's tray could become raw material for an escape plan. That is precisely the blind spot these two stories exploit. A gap between what security systems are built to catch and what human ingenuity is capable of improvising with almost nothing at all. It's also worth sitting with how quickly it happened. Sheriff Underwood estimated the entire breakout, from the door opening to 12 men clearing the perimeter fence, took less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes is barely enough time to walk the length of a cell block. It is not enough time for most safeguards to catch a mistake once it's already in motion. That's the real lesson buried inside a story that sounds, on its surface, like a punchline. The systems meant to keep people locked away are only as strong as the weakest, most tired, least experienced person standing between an inmate and a door marked exit. So what does it actually tell us? That peanut butter, something so mundane, so present in nearly every American kitchen, has more than once become the difference between a locked door and an open one. Maybe it's this: security isn't only about steel and concrete and razor wire. It's about the thousand small, human moments that happen around those barriers every single day. A tired guard, a new hire left alone with too much responsibility, a mother who knows exactly which jar nobody will think to check. Somewhere in the space between those human moments and the systems meant to control them, room for failure opens up. And every so often, someone reaches for it with nothing more than what was sitting on their lunch tray. The walls held, the doors, and the people trusted to guard them did not. If a story like this makes you think differently about what actually keeps a prison secure, you are not alone. It's rarely the thing you'd expect. Let us know in the comments what surprised you most about this one. If you want more true stories from behind the walls of America's prisons, hit subscribe and don't miss the next one, because sometimes the strangest escapes are the ones that are hardest to believe actually happened.